Voicemail was still on my phone. I hadn't deleted it. I don't know why, maybe because some part of me needed proof that it had actually happened, that I hadn't imagined the whole thing. My sister's voice, bright and a little breathless, saying, "We're all heading to the venue now. It's going to be so beautiful. Wish you could be here." She left that message the morning of my mother's 60th birthday party. I wasn't invited. I found out the same way I found out about everything in my family. By accident, too late, standing somewhere I thought was safe while the ground quietly disappeared beneath me. I was at the grocery store of all places. I ran into my aunt, my mom's older sister, one of the few relatives who'd always been straight with me, and she was wearing a blue dress I'd never seen before, her hair done up in a way she only does for occasions. She pulled me into a hug, and then she held me at arm's length, and something moved across her face. Something she was trying to swallow back down. "Sweetheart," she said, I assumed you knew." I didn't know. Let me back up. My name is Villa. I'm 31 years old. I work as a paralegal at a mid-sized firm downtown. I have a one-bedroom apartment I've been slowly making into something I'm proud of. And I have a family that has spent most of my adult life treating me like a guest who overstayed their welcome at their own childhood home. My sister Roxanne is 4 years older than me. She married a man named Patrick 8 years ago. A big wedding, beautiful venue, the whole thing. And she has 2 kids now, and she lives 12 minutes from my parents' house. My brother Colin is 2 years younger than me. He's still figuring things out, which in our family means he gets infinite patience, and I get asked at every gathering whether I've thought about doing something more stable. I'm a paralegal. I have health insurance. I have a 401k. I am the most financially stable person in my immediate family, and I have been since I was 24 years old, which is also approximately when everyone stopped noticing. It didn't start with a party. It never starts with one thing. It starts with the way your mom's voice changes when she talks about your sister versus when she talks about you. It starts with the Christmas when Roxanne got the pearl earrings your grandmother left behind, and you got a Barnes & Noble gift card, and everyone acted like that was the same thing. It starts with the phone calls you make that go to voicemail and the phone calls your siblings make that get answered on the first ring. For years, I told myself it was just family dynamics. Everyone has them. Nobody's family is perfect. I told myself I was being sensitive. I was 27 when I lent my parents $4,000 to help cover a gap in their mortgage after my dad's hours got cut. They paid it back eventually, most of it, but more important than the money was the fact that I gave it without being asked twice. I just did it because that's what you do. I was 28 when my dad's car broke down, and I spent 3 weekends helping him shop for a used replacement, test driving things, negotiating with dealers, because my sister was busy with the kids and my brother didn't know anything about cars, and I actually did. I was 29 when my mom had her hip replaced, and I took a week of PTO to stay at their house and handle meals and prescriptions and physical therapy scheduling, while Roxanne sent a fruit basket and Colin came by once. That week, while my mom was sleeping and I was washing dishes in her kitchen, I found a birthday card on the counter addressed to Roxanne. It was from my mom. On the front it said, "For my sunshine girl," in that loopy font greeting card companies use. I didn't open it. I just stood there holding it for a second, then I put it back exactly where I found it. My mom's birthday card to me that year was a text message, heart emoji, cake emoji. I kept showing up anyway. I don't know if that makes me loyal or stupid. Probably both. The year my mom turned 60, Roxanne took charge of the party planning. This was fine. Roxanne loves planning things. She's good at it. And honestly, I was relieved not to be the one coordinating a venue and catering and a guest list. I told her I was happy to help however she needed. I said it more than once. She said she had it covered. I should have pushed harder. I know that now. The months went by. I heard things in fragments, a mention of a venue here, a comment about a caterer there. I asked Roxanne once in early spring if she'd figured out the date yet, because I wanted to make sure I blocked it off at work. She said it was still being decided. I asked again a month later. She said it was coming together. At some point, she stopped mentioning it around me at all. I started to feel like I was chasing something that kept moving just out of reach, but I couldn't figure out why. I called my mom to ask if she was excited about the party, and she said yes, of course. And we talked around it the way we'd learned to talk around things in our family, close enough to touch but never quite landing. When I hung up, I sat in my car for a few minutes. Something felt off. I pushed the feeling down. The week before my grocery store run-in with my aunt, I had texted Roxanne to ask point blank if she needed me to bring anything to the party. I figured if I just acted like I knew the details, she'd have to fill me in. She texted back, "Don't worry about it. It's handled." That's it. That's the whole text. I remember staring at my phone trying to decide what to do with that. I told myself she was probably just stressed. I told myself I was reading into things. I put my phone down and went back to whatever I was doing and did not allow myself to feel what I was actually feeling. And then there was my aunt in the grocery store, in her blue dress with that look on her face. The party had been the Saturday before. My parents' backyard, a catering company, 40-something guests, family, neighbors, people from my parents' church. Roxanne had hired a photographer. There was a slideshow. There were flowers. There was no invitation for me. Not a wrong date, not a miscommunication. I was simply not on the list. My aunt stood in the produce aisle and held my hands and told me she'd assumed I'd chosen not to come, that maybe something had come up with work and she'd almost texted me during the party but hadn't wanted to make it awkward. She was crying a little by the end. I wasn't. I'd already gone somewhere else inside myself. Somewhere very quiet and very flat. The place I've learned to go when something is too large to feel all at once. "I have to go," I said. I don't remember what was in my cart. I left it. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time. Then I drove home and I poured myself a glass of water because my hands needed something to do, and I opened my laptop and I looked at the photos Roxanne had already posted on Facebook. My mother in a gold dress, laughing, surrounded by grandchildren. My dad with his arm around Colin. The slideshow my sister had made. Photos spanning 60 years of my mother's life. I scrolled through every one of them. I was in exactly 2, both from childhood, before I could have possibly done anything to deserve being erased. I closed the laptop. I didn't call anyone that night. I didn't text Roxanne. I didn't post anything. I didn't cry. I didn't do any of the things you might expect. I just sat in my apartment and let the shape of it settle over me. The full, clear shape of what my family thought of me, laid out in a guest list and a Facebook album and a voicemail from my sister that managed to make it sound like I was the one who was missing out on something. The next morning I called into work, which I almost never do. I made coffee and I sat at my kitchen table and I did the thing I had been avoiding doing for years. I wrote it all down. Not for anyone else. Just for me. Every loan, every favor, every week of PTO, every food basket Roxanne sent instead of showing up, every text that went unanswered, every time I'd made myself smaller so there would be more room for everyone else. I wrote it all down until my hand cramped and then I typed it until my laptop battery died. When I plugged it back in, I had a text from Roxanne. "Mom said Aunt Cheryl ran into you. Are you okay?" Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I need to explain." Not even, "Can we talk?" "Are you okay?" I put my phone face down on the table. I thought about what I wanted, not what was expected of me, not what would keep the peace, not what a good daughter or a good sister would do, what I actually wanted. I'd never really let myself do that before. I wanted answers. I wanted to look my sister in the face and hear her explain herself. And then, I wanted to decide what came next. I texted back, "Can you come over Saturday morning? Just you." She said yes. I think she expected a conversation where I would cry and she would apologize and we would hug it out and everything would go back to the comfortable imbalance we'd always called normal. She brought coffee. Of course she did. Roxanne always arrives prepared for the version of events she's decided will happen. I let her in. I didn't take the coffee. I sat across from her at my kitchen table and I said, "Tell me why I wasn't invited to Mom's party." She did what I expected. She started with logistics. It was small, it got complicated. The venue had a capacity limit. And I let her talk. And then I said, "The venue was your backyard, Roxanne. It seated 40 people. I counted in the photos." She shifted. She said things had been tense lately, that she hadn't known how to bring it up, that she thought maybe some space would be good for everyone. "Space," I said. "You know how you can be sometimes," she said. I asked her what that meant. She talked around it for a while, something about how I make people feel judged, something about how I'm always so serious about everything, something about how Colin had mentioned once that I'd said something that upset him at Thanksgiving 2 years ago. 2 years ago. She'd been holding that like a trump card. You excluded me from our mother's 60th birthday party, I said, because Colin had his feelings hurt at Thanksgiving 2 years ago. She said it wasn't just that. She said it was a lot of things. She said sometimes the family just needed to be able to have a nice time without worrying about, and she stopped herself there. Without worrying about me, I finished for her. She didn't deny it. I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I said, I'd like you to look me in the eye and tell me the last thing I did for this family. She opened her mouth. Not a long time ago, I said. In the last year. She closed it again. Mom's hip replacement, I said. I took a week off work. I handled the pharmacy, the PT scheduling, the meals. You sent a fruit basket. I paused. Dad's car, 3 weekends. The loan in 2019, $4,000. You can ask them if you forgot. The Thanksgiving dinners I've hosted 4 years running because no one else wanted to deal with the oven at Mum and Dad's. The birthday parties I've shown up to, the school plays, We know you do a lot, Roxanne said. Her voice was doing something careful now. I don't think you do, I said. I think you've taken it so for granted that you've actually managed to convince yourselves I'm the difficult one. That's almost impressive. She cried. I'd known she would. Roxanne has always been better at crying than explaining herself, and for most of my life that's worked in her favor because I'd always been the one to back down when she got emotional. I'd learned somewhere along the way that her tears were more important than my hurt, that keeping the peace was my job because I was the one who was built for it. Steady, dependable, serious Willa who you don't have to worry about. I handed her a box of tissues. I waited. When she was done, she said that she was sorry, that she should have included me, that she hadn't realized how much it would hurt. That's the part I keep coming back to, I said. You didn't think it would hurt. You didn't think about it at all. She left an hour later. She didn't finish her coffee. I walked her to the door and I watched her drive away. And I didn't feel the things I thought I would feel. Not relief, not satisfaction, not sadness exactly. Just something settling. Like a compass finding north. I called my parents that afternoon. My dad answered. I told him I knew about the party, and there was a pause long enough that I understood he had known. Not that he'd planned it with Roxanne, maybe, but that he'd known. He'd been there. He'd seen the 40 guests. He'd looked around and not said anything. He said, Willa, I'm not calling to fight, I said. I'm calling because I need you to know that I know, and I need some time. He said he understood. I'm not sure he did, but he said it. My mother called me that evening. She was crying before she finished saying my name. She said she hadn't known Roxanne hadn't invited me, which I don't entirely believe, but I chose not to press it. She said she was sorry. She said it wasn't right. She said family is supposed to, and I let her talk, because sometimes people need to say things out loud to understand them. After she finished, I said, Mom, I love you. But I need you to understand something. I have spent a long time making myself available to this family in every way I know how. I've done it because I love you and because I wanted to belong here. I still do. But I can't keep doing it from a place where I'm not considered real enough to invite to your birthday party. She cried harder. I waited. I'm not disappearing, I said, but things have to be different. For the first 6 weeks after that conversation, I pulled back. Not dramatically. I didn't send a long email. I didn't make proclamations. I just stopped volunteering. When Roxanne texted asking if I could watch her kids while she went to an appointment, I said I wasn't available. When my dad called because he needed help figuring out a problem with his insurance paperwork, I said I could look at it when I had time, and then I let a week go by. When my mom asked if I could bring a dish to a family dinner, I said I might not be able to make it. None of them knew how to handle this version of me. Roxanne called twice. My dad called once. My mom texted daily for a while and then every few days and then weekly. They were all gentle, which was new. They were careful in a way they'd never had to be before. In the meantime, I talked to a therapist for the first time in my life. something I'd been meaning to do for years and had never prioritized because I'd always been too busy prioritizing other people. I told her the whole thing, from the beginning, all the ways I'd shrunk myself into something useful and then been surprised when useful was all they'd seen. She asked me once what I'd been afraid would happen if I'd stopped helping sooner. I sat with that question for a long time. I think I'd been afraid they wouldn't love me if they didn't need me. And I think on some level I'd been right to be afraid of that. And I had to figure out what to do with both of those things at once. There is a particular pain in being someone's resource more than you are their person. It doesn't announce itself with cruelty. It settles in quietly, in the space between what you give and what you receive, in the difference between being valued and being valued for something. You can live inside that gap for years before you name it. My aunt reached out a few weeks after the grocery store. She asked if she could take me to lunch. I said yes. She showed up and she sat across from me and she said, "I should have texted you the day of the party. I knew something was wrong. I told myself it wasn't my business." "It's okay," I said. "It's not," she said. "You deserve someone in your corner." We meet for lunch every few weeks now. She is, I've realized, the person in that family who actually sees me. Sometimes that's enough. 8 months after the party, Roxanne and I had another conversation. A real one this time, not a defensive one. She told me she had thought for a long time that I didn't need things the way other people did, that I always seemed fine, that she'd somehow convinced herself that being capable meant being okay with whatever happened. She said she knew now that wasn't true. I told her that capable people have to perform fineness so often that eventually everyone around them believes the performance. She thought about that for a while. Then she said, "I want to be better." I said, "I know. Me too. We're not fixed. Families don't fix like a broken bone. Clean break, clean heal, back to what it was before. It's slower than that, messier, more like scar tissue. Some things between Roxanne and me may never be what they should have been. Some dinners are still awkward. Some conversations still stop short of where they need to go. But I go to those dinners now as myself, not as the reliable one, not as the one who asks nothing and gives everything, not as the one whose presence is negotiable. I go as someone who has decided that belonging to herself is not in conflict with belonging to a family, even an imperfect one. Last spring, my mum had a small dinner for Mother's Day. She called me 2 weeks ahead of time to ask if I could come, and she said it in a way that understood it was a real question, that I might have plans, that I was a person with a life, that my presence was something to be asked for rather than assumed. I said I'd love to come, and I meant it. I still have the voicemail. I think someday soon I'll delete it. Not in anger, not to forget, but because I won't need it anymore. The proof I needed isn't on my phone. It's in every conversation I've had since, every boundary I've held, every time I've chosen to stay in a room as my actual self, instead of the quieter, smaller version I used to bring to the door. I keep a wooden box on my dresser. Inside it, I've put a few things. A photo of my aunt and me at lunch, a card my therapist gave me at the end of our first session that just said you were allowed to take up space, and a printed copy of everything I wrote down that morning after the party. Not to dwell on it, just to remember where I started. Healing, I've decided, doesn't always mean forgetting, and it doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it just means you stop needing the wound to explain you. I'm 31 years old. I am still learning what it looks like to be in a family without disappearing into it. But I'm still here. And I showed up as myself. That's enough. There's something nobody tells you about being the dependable one. You don't get credit for it. You get invisibility. For years, I thought if I just kept showing up, kept driving my dad to dealerships, kept rescheduling my PTO for my mom's recovery, kept saying yes before anyone finished asking, eventually it would register. Eventually, I would be seen not just as useful, but as someone worth including. Someone real. I believed in the way you believe things you've never said out loud, that love would follow effort the way morning follows night. That was the deal I'd made, even if I was the only one who'd signed it. What I didn't understand then is that when you never ask for anything, people stop wondering what you need. And when they stop wondering, they stop checking. And when they stop checking, you become furniture, present, reliable, easy to overlook. That's not cruelty, most of the time. It's just the quiet math of how neglect compounds when nobody's paying attention. The morning I found out about my mother's party, I had to sit with a question I'd been avoiding for a long time. How much of this did I allow? I don't say that to blame myself for what Roxanne chose. What she did was wrong, and she knows it now. But I had spent a decade making myself so easy to take for granted that taking me for granted required almost no effort at all. That was something I had to own, not with shame, but with honesty. The kind that actually changes something. What saved me wasn't anger, even though the anger was real and it was fair. What saved me was deciding to think clearly in the middle of it. I could have sent a long message. I could have posted something. I could have made the family dinner a battlefield. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table and I wrote everything down. And in writing it down, I saw the pattern. Not just what they had done, but what I had built that made it possible. That kind of clear-eyed accounting isn't easy. It requires you to look at your own choices without flinching, and most of us would rather stay angry than do that. And then I had to decide to keep going anyway. Not to pretend it hadn't happened, not to forgive before I was ready, but to get up, make the call, have the conversation, hold the boundary, and do it again the next week and the week after that, quietly, without an audience. That's the part no one sees, the ordinary, unglamorous work of rebuilding yourself inside a relationship that hurt you, not because the other person deserves it, but because you do. Roxanne and I are still figuring each other out. My parents are learning to ask instead of assume. It's slow. Some weeks it doesn't feel like progress at all. But I go to those dinners now as the full version of myself, and that is something I did not know I was allowed to do until I decided it was true. The wooden box on my dresser isn't a monument to what they did. It's a reminder of what I chose after.